Hello and welcome to another live stream of Stageworthy. Stageworthy podcast is on hiatus, but every now and then I'm coming to you with a live stream to talk to some interesting people. And tonight I'm going to be talking with Theater of the Beat, and we're going to be talking about their show Forgiven Forgotten. Joining me as I pull out if here, and joining me are artistic director of Theater of the Beat, Cedric Martin. Director of Forgiven Forgotten, Erin Brandenburg, and writer of the play and member of the original cast and Theater of the Beat founder, Johnny Wideman. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome. Just to get started, Johnny, as the writer of the play, can you tell me about what Forgiven Forgotten is about?
Yeah, I guess it looks at a community's response to crime and I guess the rippling effects of crime. So it kind of looks at the victim side, the perpetrator side, and all who kind of get pulled into that situation.
Was there any particular impetus for the creation of this play?
Yeah, actually, I was working at a day camp trying to research ways of disciplining quote unquote disciplining campers, and I started researching restorative discipline, which is like I guess a style of conflict mediation that they use with children in some school settings. And
Hmm.
from there I started kind of expanding that research, and I started talking with restorative justice mediators. And then I got very into the idea of, I guess, the role of restorative justice in a community. I guess specifically around trying to bring healing to situations where there's been conflict or pain. And then, yeah, I became pretty fixated on the idea of writing a play to start conversations about it.
Now, as a something that was originally, it was back in 2013. So this was performed, in front of a live audience, the way that we used to do, but in the before times. What was what you performed it originally at the Conrad Center for the Performing Arts? Where else has it been performed, and what was the audience's reaction to the conversation you were trying to start?
Yeah, I think it's one of the shows that I've acted in the most, and possibly one of the shows that Theater of the Beat has produced the most. So we've performed it all across the country, including in prisons, which was very interesting, bringing the show there. I think this show is like it's very awkward intentionally. And so there's a lot of like squirming and discomfort in the show, but then that brought just a lot of really great conversation afterwards. When we presented in prisons, yeah, like there was just such a deep understanding. And I think there's this stereotype of folks who are incarcerated, maybe not being educated or,
Hmm.
whatever the stereotype may be, but they got everything right off the get-go, whereas that wasn't necessarily the case in other shows or in other performances. And so, yeah, we were really blown away by like, I guess, how people kind of interacted with metaphor and
Hmm.
allegory and how they just seem to understand that so quickly.
Without spoiling too much, what kind of squirming would we expect from this play? Like, what is it that's making us squirm when we watch Forgiven Forgotten?
It's a good question. Yeah. There's like it's just a very awkward script. Like I think it definitely intentionally. I'm not just saying that like after the fact. Like there are a lot of just awkward conversations that get a little bit tense, and where people just really don't know what to say to each other, or people say the wrong things, which is like just very much the case with any kind of difficult topic, especially if you're talking to folks about their loved ones who are
Mm.
incarcerated. I think this play takes place in like a very kind of like upper class, middle upper class kind of environment where that is just really taboo and not a common conversation. And so you see people kind of wading into a conversation that they've never had before, which just is awkward. And so I think that's the sort of awkward. It's like
Mm.
socially awkward.
Nice, nice. So now that we're currently in a position where this can't be performed in a live setting at this time, now Theater of the Beat has done a few things as digitally. There've been a few audio productions the Theater of the Beat has done. Um, in terms of transferring this from the live medium into a digital medium, Erin, as the director, I'll ask you to speak to this. How do you adapt a play like this for primarily audio medium?
Yeah, I mean, the first, I'd say, like, big difference was just how we worked with the actors. Where normally when you're working on a play, you have a, a bit of time to, get to know the play, get to know the characters, work on the staging, kind of figure out the issues and the problems of the play, and like talk about it. And it's, you stage it a few different ways, or you rehearse it over and over, so you can try it in different ways. With this one, we basically had the actors for one day for the scenes to record. So we had read the play together, and we had talked it through. But I'd say I was a little bit worried that it would kind of take longer for them to get the characters or to get the moments. But I think, it's sort of like transferring something from live theater to film, where you can zero in on those moments rather than having to make them so you need to repeat them every single time. You just need to get them once really well. So that was just sort of a different way, and I kind of miss spending the time with people, because I think we initially had budgeted or scheduled for quite a lot longer recording sessions, because I thought, well, we're gonna have to really take this apart, and then you did it, and you have like talented actors like we had, and it was sort of like, oh, okay, they nailed that. Okay, great. But then you find that the actual storytelling, or the staging, I guess, is in how you edit it together, and how you find those moments, and how you create those awkward pauses, and try to make them as significant as possible through sound, or through Foley, or through just different sound textures. So that was like the thing I thought would take a lot longer. I was actually the fastest, and the thing I thought, oh well, we'll cut it together, it's going to be great. That actually took a lot longer. But yeah, and then there's some things just like, on stage, you see a person walk into a scene holding an object, and you see what that object is. Audio, obviously, you don't have that, so you have to convey those things in other ways. And I think we did add a few lines with Johnny's permission, just more like, here's my phone, or here's a photo I'm showing you of my child, or here's a bottle of wine. Thank you for this. Some of them are just a little bit obvious, but they help tell the story.
Were there any scriptural changes that had to be made aside from adding lines, or aside from the time spent with the actors? What is the mindset of transferring something from the stage to audio?
Yeah, well, there was a couple. They were in the script, but they were more sort of these video transition moments where we saw a young child, and so in the script it was described as this 3-year-old, and they're doing it's sort of like a family video type of thing. So audio wise, we can't see that, so we transferred that into more of a sound. I mean, it's pretty literal, but I think I had to write a couple of lines just for the kids to say. And luckily we have 3 kids running around here, so we had lots of captive actors who had to perform for us.
There you go, the best kind.
Yeah.
Now you've also, along with this, there's a visualization that goes along with the audio. Can you tell me a little bit about creating a visualization that doesn't overtake the audio?
Yeah, that was actually really challenging. We knew, I think Cedric had the idea of having a visual component to the piece. We knew we wanted it to be an audio drama, and so like the audio is the main storytelling vehicle. That's what you want to come through. That's what you want the audience to experience. And so the tricky thing is, because our eyes are so like, we're such a visual culture, as soon as we see something move, we're following it, and we're like watching it. That's where our attention goes. So if you want the audience to listen carefully, which you do, and I think this play works really well as an audio drama, because you're kind of in those very intimate conversations and in these family moments where, you know, it actually it makes the awkwardness, or you're kind of like immersed in it, and that's really effective. So yeah, to try and find a visual language that would not compete with that, but actually support it and add to it was a challenge. And we tried a bunch of different ways. We sort of thought, well, you know, if we go more textural or like colored blobs and they kind of take on the figures or something. So Ali tried that. Our animator Ali Carroll, luckily was up for experimenting on a few ideas, and we just found like it was too busy and it was too much, and you kind of just got lost in it. So we ended up stripping things way back. But I think what we managed to find is a really nice balance of like really subtle movements, but also images that are not telling you the story you're hearing, because you don't need that. You need something else, or you need something that's going to give you a slightly different perspective or just a different coloring of things. So like for example, in one scene, I think the first scene, it's a scene between these two characters who are married, and one man's, he's in jail and he's about to be incarcerated for a number of years, and his wife's there basically telling him she's not going to visit him and not going to see him. And the image we kind of just decided on was just a figure drawing lines, like checking the days off, and they kind of multiply and repeat over and over and over again. It becomes this rhythm and becomes this pattern, and it grows and grows and grows, and you fade out to see this wall of time basically is missing, which becomes more significant later on in the story when he's talking about the things he's missing and the ways sort of he's what he's missing in his life and sort of what's most important. So
you know, like you're sort of describing, we were talking before we went live about that fine balance between the visual and the audio, and how, I mean, audio is, I mean, I like to think of it as a visual medium. You have this advantage that you're sort of we're so reactive to sound that we're sort of beaming sounds into somebody's ear holes, and we can evoke things through that and make them see things even though they're not seeing things. But you're right about how like we will pay attention more to a visual thing. So that fine line, it's a very difficult line to tread. Did you and Cedric work together on finding that fine line, or is it mostly you as the director with the animator?
Yeah, it was mostly me. We kind of storyboarded the whole thing together as far as like sort of the basic image and sort of what the animation might be. And I think as we've been working, we've been finding that we actually need to pull things even farther back and like really, really be subtle with a lot of this stuff. So yeah, and luckily I think like we also, I mean, time was another factor. Like it would be lovely to spend a year, you know, doing the animation for this, but we just didn't have the time. So also finding that balance of like what kind of style is going to support that. So I think like we ended up going with a more rough looking style, but I think that actually really complements the story and the sound quality we found.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cedric, how long have you been the artistic director of Theater of the Beat?
It's just about 2 years now. So in January of 2020 is when I started, and then started working on great timing. Start working on a live production, and then all of a sudden, you're in rehearsals. You say, "Okay, we'll see you guys all next week," and then you don't see them next week. And I think it's been 2 years since that show.
That's definitely that's a story that as I was doing the podcast over the last year and a half, that's the kind of story that I heard over and over. Like rehearsals were in there and then they stopped. And what was the show that you were working on at the time?
Yeah, it was actually another show that Erin was directing. It was a show called Sail a Song that Johnny also wrote for Theater of the Beat, and it was an original musical, sort of like a social justice musical. I don't know if Johnny wants to talk more about that later, but we're actually hoping to bring it back next spring. We're hoping to have some live audiences, and that's sort of the hope is to return to that show we were working on just before the pandemic hit, make that the first like in-person live theater that we do again.
It feels weird to be asking you this question since Johnny is one of the founders of Theater of the Beat, but he's not the artistic director you are. So I'm going to ask you if you can tell me about Theater of the Beat and its mission and more.
Yeah, totally. So we're a touring theater company, which sounds very strange these days. What does that even mean? But ultimately, we sort of boil it down that we don't have one home base, that we like to be transient. We like to work in a lot of different communities. We like to work with a lot of different people. But our main focus is on stories of social justice. We want to tell stories that are important to Canadians, important to these communities today. So, for example, the most recent show that we worked on online was called Unmute, the Impact of a Pandemic on Gender-Based Violence. So it's addressing the rise of domestic violence during the pandemic now. So that was something we were hearing throughout, and that's something we wanted to focus on. And so even though we were virtual, we were able to connect with 22 different communities, and we found partners in local different cities that would then help us host these live Zoom events. So we were able to perform out in BC, even though I was here in Toronto, and we were able to perform in Manitoba and Alberta and Saskatchewan. So it was great that we were able to sort of have that feeling of touring and seeing different friends across the country, but we were still sort of, here online.
There's been that, I mean, theater people have been making this transition for the last 2 years of how to learn how to do like live streaming and video productions and things like that. For you guys, even as we're still in the pandemic and we're just, some performances are starting to come out. As of today, Soul Pepper just announced an in-person season for next year and all of this sort of stuff, but we're still sort of like on the edge of maybe. And but what was the biggest learning curve for Theater of the Beat as far as going digital? What surprised you the most? What was the biggest hurdle to overcome?
Yeah. So I would say right at the beginning of the pandemic, I was very hesitant to work on anything like on YouTube, on Zoom, on any sort of like virtual platforms other than audio. I felt that audio had already sort of established itself as a medium that could tell stories well. And so like you think of the radio plays that had their golden day, and I think there was a great resurgence of radio plays. And so I immediately jumped on that idea. And so we worked on creating one of the shows that we did previously on tour and turning that into an audio drama. So that's where we had that idea. And we worked on that. And we had some good success, and we were able to get that into some different communities, and they could listen to it all pre-recorded. But we sort of still missed that live element. And I guess what I was hesitant about with like Zoom and with other sort of digital mediums was that I worried about like just taking like a Shakespeare play and putting on virtual backgrounds, and you can just tell Romeo and Juliet aren't beside each other, right? Like it just doesn't feel. I still wanted that intimacy, and so when we worked on Unmute, I was a bit nervous going into it, but I think what surprised me the most was how well we were able to make it work, because we wrote the show for the medium. And so we wrote the show to be on Zoom. We wrote the show to happen during the pandemic, that we can't be together. And this is the way people are connecting with their friends. They're talking to each other on Zoom, but there's something going on in the background. You're trying to figure out, why are they a little bit off? What's going on? And it's dealing with that domestic violence, because it was a concern for many, and still is a concern, to be honest.
Yeah. There's this thing about just trying to take a play that we've done before and just throw that onto Zoom, and the thing that doesn't quite work about that, and I've seen people do some great things with digital theater, but you almost always have to acknowledge that this is something different. This is not the usual place. We're in this strange space because there's so many strange things about live streaming, like there's always a lag between things, and so somebody's talking over somebody but they don't realize it, and all of these little things that can go wrong. But like you say, the ones that I think have worked the best are the ones that sort of acknowledge that this is the space that we're working in. And also I have to say that I think the idea of touring with Zoom the way that you did is it's not something that I've really heard of before. It's a bit of an innovation as far as, doing the best that we can with the tools that we have to be able to go into a space and do that. Who came up with the idea of that digital tour, and and how did that come up?
Yeah. So I mean, when you're doing stuff online, like right now when we're on live on YouTube, right? Like anyone could be watching from anywhere in the world. And we did, when we first premiered that show on Mute, we had one of our actors grew up in New Zealand, so he has family from New Zealand that was watching live. We had some of the metrics showed us that we had some people from the UK watching us live and things like that, which is fine. But when you're dealing with a show that's so important to individuals, they want to know how to get those resources for themselves. And so when you're partnering with these local cities, these local communities, you're able to get individualistic resources to them. So we'd partner with a local shelter or a local call center in each of the sort of cities we were performing in. So we'd actually have someone from a Vancouver hotline there, and they would demonstrate sort of a crisis call at the end of the show for everyone to sort of see, hey, it's not so scary. What happens when I call this number? And also we'd make sure that everyone had sort of like a resource PDF at the end of the show, so they'd know who to call when they're in Vancouver, who to call when they're in Hamilton, because it's not just the same, because the first couple of performances were for KW, but those people from the UK, those people from New Zealand could basically tuned out for all the resource section because it's not pertinent to them. So that's sort of where that idea kind of grew from.
But I think that was really successful with that show, because you were able to somehow hold on to the, like, I think one of the special things Theatre the Beat does is touring in small communities that don't have a lot of theater coming into them, or sometimes this is the only theater, or or this is a very theater for a very specific community. So through this tours, and I think through partnering with these community agencies, it was really interesting to see how, like, it was actually a tour. You saw very different people depending, and who knew each other and some didn't, but and then like how I think, and part of the show was also audience participation and audience reaction, which I was sort of like, oh man, this is going to be a hard sell. Like how are you going to sell? Like there's no way my grandma's going to like push a button and go, yep, okay, I got, like, but it actually worked so well, because I think by the time we did this tour, all of us had been trained in how to use Zoom, or most people had, or had helpers who could kind of help them, push the buttons. And we were kind of used to interacting in this way. Whereas like if you ask somebody to jump up in a live theater situation, it's a lot more intimidating. But this was sort of like, well, I'm at home. All right, yeah, I'll give it a go. So I was actually surprised at how much participation we got, and how vulnerable people were, and sort of how open they were to it. That was very surprising to me.
That may be the advantage of Zoom, because you're not going to convince somebody in a room full of 300 people to get up and be that vulnerable. But when it sort of feels like just them in their living room, it's a lot safer of a place for them to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the things that I love to talk about on Stageworthy is to talk a little bit about people's theater origin stories. Now, Johnny, I'll come back to, because he's been on the podcast before, and we've talked about a little bit about his origin story, but I want to go over that again. But Erin and Cedric, you're brand new to Stageworthy, so I want to start with Erin, and I want to ask you about your theater origin story. What led you to where you are now, and what inspired you to look at theater as a discipline?
Right. Well, I was bitten by a radioactive spider, and everything changed.
Love it.
Kidding. Yeah. No, I think it's just always been something I've been interested in and done since I was a kid. Like I was the kid that would make all their cousins dress up clothes and put on a show for your aunties. Like that was me. So that kind of just kept going. And then I was lucky enough to find a partner who was kind of into that too. And we started making shows together and writing things. And yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of theater going on in Leamington, Ontario. So we needed to come up to the city. I would say there isn't really. Bless them. They're lovely people. That's where I started, with the Sun Parlor Players Community Theater. That was one of the first shows. But yeah, so I think came up to Toronto and sort of kept making shows out of our basements. That's kind of really where it's started and kind of continued to be. And luckily enough, I've kind of found other collaborators and people who are were nice enough to let me work for them. Yeah, did a bit of training at Soul Pepper a few years ago, and sort of have kept working. We have a company called Kitchen Bands that's sort of an umbrella for a lot of the stuff we do. So that's in semi-retirement, but we pull it out every now and again.
Yeah, it's nice to have something you could just sort of like pull out when you need it.
Yeah, and I think I've also been very interested. Like, I was never interested in doing one thing. Like, I'm not like, all right, Shakespeare, that's my thing. Like, I don't know. So like, I started as an actor, and then moved to playwriting and wrote plays because I was, wanting to tell my own story, and then moved to directing because I was frustrated with having to find people to direct the shows I was doing. So maybe I'm just a control freak, but I like to think of it. I have a very clear vision for things.
One might say that can be a fine line, but I mean, it sounds like you are you've got a lot of disciplines under your belt. Still now, are you able to jump back and forth between all of your hyphenates?
Yeah, I mean, not so much the performing these days, except for the odd radio commercial for the play we're doing. But yeah, I mean, I'm working on a television pilot now, and sort of got other writing things on the go, and directing a few shows. And I mean, I guess for me, the writing, directing, performing are all kind of the same storytelling. Like, I guess I kind of approach the writing as a slightly different way of directing, or the directing is a slightly different way of writing. You're trying to find the best way to tell the story. So
nice.
Lots of hyphens.
Cedric, can you tell me about your theater origin story? What's your story here?
Yeah. Unfortunately, mine's a similar origin story to Erin, so we wouldn't make good comic book characters because it's the same story over. But I grew up. I was also bitten by a spider, and then after I was bitten by that same spider, my cousins and I used to like to put on plays growing up. And one day my older cousin got a video camera, so then those plays turned to every time we'd have a family get together, we'd film short films together that we'd never end. But when all the parents said it was time to go, we had to gather them by the TV. We'd plug in the old video camera into the TV, and then we'd watch the videos that we had just filmed. And basically how we do all of our editing was we'd do a take, and if we liked it, we kept it, and if we didn't like it, we'd roll the film back and then re-record over it. But that means there'd be lots of like jumps where like we didn't time it perfectly, and so the start of the old scene and things like that. So that was sort of my childhood. But then as I got to high school, I took some drama classes and things like that, and I was in grade 12, and I started applying to schools. And I was in this very small town where I did not know any actors, and I honestly, in grade 12, did not know you could actually go to school for acting, for theater, for anything related to like the arts like that. I knew about the maths and the sciences, and that was about it. And so that's what I was gearing up to go into school for. And then I see on these universities that it's like one of the lists on the drop down to what you can apply for. And I was like, what? Okay, I'll apply to like one or two of these just because it's funny or whatever. But then I got asked to come in for some auditions, and then I was kind of hooked. I was like, all right, that's it. That's what I'm going to school for, despite what my mother wanted. And I finished up school. I went to Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. After I graduated, me and two other very ambitious friends, we moved to Toronto together. I had lived with that guy, one of the guys, for 6 years. So through school, and then through our move to Toronto, and living with him for several years in Toronto. And myself and him and another guy, we started our own theater company in Toronto called Don't Look Down Theater Company. And through that company, we produced 10 shows in about 4 years. And that we were actually starting to gear up to partner with some other companies and get our own space in 2020. And then, of course, COVID hit. And so we've been on a hiatus as well throughout COVID because, I've been busy with Theater of the Beat, which has been great. But also we're so passionate about just wanting to be in a theater with people. And so we're going to sort of just keep a pause. It's also a more of a passion project than a paying job. So it's okay that we're waiting and not spending money on virtual programmings and stuff. So.
I noticed one thing about Erin, your story, and Cedric, your story, and that was that you would, like, sort of rope out your family into doing plays. But the question that I have that's sort of missing from that story is, how did you know what a play was? What was your introduction to what a play is, so that you knew to force your cousins and brothers and sisters into doing these with you?
I can go first while Erin thinks.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, we actually started out with circuses. I remember being like 3 years old, and my grandmother had these like building blocks and stuff like that, and I just like put them on my arms, and I was the strong man, and I'd walk around with like these little like blocks that would go over my arms and stuff. My cousin had like this giant couch cushion that he'd like put on his head, and he was supposed to be a clown and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's sort of where we started, and then those kind of just evolved into like all of the silly stories that those characters that of this circus would like do, and so when we'd get together, we just like start making up stories and play pretend and stuff like that. So we didn't really necessarily know it was like plays, but I guess sort of my introduction to like plays in that realm was also with community theater. I wasn't acting in them. I didn't get the opportunity to do community theater when I was a kid, but I remember seeing the community theater shows that would come through our town once a year. And as I started getting a little bit older, our neighbor, one over from us, was the CFO of Stratford Festival. So he'd often give our family like tickets throughout the year. And so I'd often get to go see shows at Stratford as well. So I was pretty lucky that I'd see that. But as a young child, that wasn't that thrilling, was to go to Stratford. But as I get older, I appreciate it more.
Erin?
Yeah, I think my first influences were probably like I wanted to be Annie. Yeah, I just like loved that musical, and so I was like, I want to be that. There was a lot of orphanage plays that we did, and probably like Bugs Bunny. So mostly like TV and movies. But I think Stratford was probably like the first play I'd seen too, other than school plays,
right?
Which were still kind of magical. I don't know. I really loved being in the school plays, or just any kind of like. I think I played the King and the Pied Piper in kindergarten, and I remember sitting up there and being like, okay, I like this. I like this.
Nice. Those are, just seeing things at Stratford and other things, those are all really impactful. I can remember myself being introduced to theater, but through musical soundtracks. Once I figured out that they told a story, I was like, oh, now I have to figure out all of this. And then also, when you're in school, like you mentioned, like doing these little plays and stuff. And then it was like, okay, so I make everybody do this. And I did much the same thing as you and Cedric. All right, Johnny, why, if you could give us your theater origin story, because I know there's a lot there, and I want to get into the origin of Theater of the Beat as well, and things like that. So let's start with your theater origin story.
Okay, I will say my playwriting origin story, because that seems more relevant to the current hat that I'm wearing. I wanted to be a cartoonist. I was like really into cartooning and drawing, and when I was in high school, my grades weren't good enough to go to university, but I had a guidance counselor who was like kind of prejudiced against like college, and like just like would not let me go to college, even though I really wanted to. And so without me having any decision, he was like, no, you're going to university, and like, we just need to get your grades up. And so then I had told my art teacher this, that it felt so unfair. And she was like, you're a class clown, you should do theater. And I was like really nervous about it. But like the backstory is like, I had a really cool grade 8 or elementary school theater guy at our school, and he put on massive productions every year. So I had that background, but then just kind of moved on from it. And then so she pulled some strings. In my rural high school, you were only allowed to take one arts course. So she pulled some strings to let me take fine art and theater. And like our first project, we had to write these characters and perform them. You had an A, B, and C, and the teacher would say A and C and you have to like switch from character to character and then just like go into these monologues. Like looking back, like pretty difficult stuff for grade 11 or whatever. But I realized that like these characters that I had built, like impressed people. Like all the cool kids that were in the theater class because they didn't want to do the other classes were all there, and they were like laughing at my jokes, and they were like really into what I was doing. And then she said the next project was like we were all going to basically write our own play and then submit it, and she would choose the best ones. And I wrote the like theatrical biography of Angus Young, who is the lead guitarist from AC/DC. and it got chosen, and then
amazing.
And I was like, got to direct my like Angus Young biography. And then I just like, I really got into writing my own stories there. And similar to Cedric, like a friend got a camcorder, and we just like started putting on our own shows. The SWAT team got called once on one of our productions because we were doing like an armed car chase, like actually. So that was pretty intense. But yeah, like I think I got into storytelling like purely because of like positive affirmation from my peers. And I think like then being in theater, like people like literally clap for you after you work. And I think I just got like really into that affirmation bit.
Truth. Now, as one of the co-founders of Theater of the Beat, I would like what was it that encouraged you and the original team to create this company and come up with your social justice agenda that you wanted to pursue for the company?
Yeah, I think. I guess like to speak to the kind of social justice focus, like I think at that time I was really struggling with the concept of art for art's sake. Like I don't think I saw that as valid or something. Like I think I thought that it had to have another purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I would not say that now. I still think art is like an amazing tool for a conversation. And I think it's honestly, it's probably the best tool. But I think, I believe that there needed to be like, I mean, we're always going back to the kind of spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down idea. Like it was like, how can you make propaganda entertaining and engaging, essentially? And so, I really got into that idea. I mean, at the same time, I think it's like, kind of what Erin said about like, you write a play, then you need to find a director, then you need to find a producer. And so it was just kind of like, ways of creating work and staying working. I also just never thought we were gonna make it. So there was never, I mean, like Fringe touring, I met Phil in the Fringe in 2011. Like we literally made $800, I think, collectively for like an entire summer of touring. And like, in terms of like our profit, and we had like lived off of sandwiches and slept in weird places. And like, I think I really idolized that kind of like roughing it, vagabondery sort of thing. And so theater and being a vagabond seemed to go really well together. And so, kind of just like doing what I loved with the people that I loved, for causes that we were all really passionate about. It was like the perfect storm of having passion in your life.
There's something about, I think, I remember when I came out of theater school in the early 90s, and throughout most of the 90s, I'd go to these like events and people would talk about that their goal was art for artists. And I always like ended up really like upset at that. Like, we're doing theater and we're doing theater for ourselves. Is that what we're talking about? Like, forget the audience. Like I was always like, I always had such a problem with that term. And I think you and I sort of, you probably heard it around the same time or maybe a little bit after, and had similar reactions. Theater of the Beat, that first production when you started in Montreal, with your Fringe tour. And as I understand it, you guys were then going to Edmonton, and you kind of did a meandering route where you performed across Canada, making your way, knowing that you were going to get there by the Edmonton Fringe. Is that right? Is that the true story?
Yeah, so we were doing a show about a Mennonite draft dodger, and then Mennonite communities across Canada kind of like heard about the show, because that's just what happens in the Mennonite community. People hear about things. And yeah, like, so then these Mennonite communities started reaching out and being like, hey, is it true you have a show about a draft dodger? And they started like giving us venues and then advertising the show, and then giving us places to sleep and feeding us. And like, we started just doing that between fringes. So yeah, Montreal toured, Edmonton toured, Vancouver, and then drove back. And then that basically just became the model of like finding people to put on the shows, feed us, and give us a bed. And we could do theater for really cheap, cheap from a touring perspective. So yeah, that just kind of stuck.
And that roughing it that you guys did, that journey when you guys were sleeping wherever in strange places, as you said, and sort of like eating sandwiches and stuff. With some groups of people, that kind of roughing it might prevent them from working together ever again. But you guys stuck together and kept working for several years. Like, there was like not a whole lot of changeover. You guys kept doing shows. And what was it that kept you guys together? Was there a particular attitude that you had that kept things sticky? Like, what was it that kept you guys from, I don't know, turning on each other?
Yeah. Like a horrible case of optimism. Just like always seeing the best in any situation, and just being the sort of people that could like excite each other. Ben Wirt was one of our original members. He's like one of the most excitable, passionate people I know. And just like, it's just, I don't know, it would get contagious. And, you know, one person's tired, then another person gets excited about something, and it just kind of spreads. And I think we just kind of like fanned each other's flames for like a very long time together, working together.
That's great. I mean, to have that kind of enthusiasm is, I guess, what you really need for that kind of thing. But you guys did quite a few shows.
Yeah. And we would like, I mean, we would like drive through the night from like Ontario to Winnipeg, which is like a 24-hour drive. And then we would land and then like sleep and then like put on a show the next day. And so eventually Theater the Beat worked in a policy where you can't perform after driving for like 4 hours straight, because we one weekend over like a Friday to a Sunday, we performed 6 different times, I believe 2 different shows. And it's just like, it is not like, I don't know, there was like energy because we were young and passionate, but like not sustainable.
That is not a sustainable performance model at all.
Not safe.
Yeah, no, exactly. Not safe at all. And probably not our best work.
That stretch between like Toronto and Winnipeg, like when we were driving, we didn't do it in like straight through, but even so, I think we almost hit like a deer or a moose twice.
Yeah.
So I would not want to do that straight through at all.
No, I would not recommend it. We hit snow. It was rough.
All right. So just sort of as we start to draw to a close, first off, I'm curious, like, if you could let everybody know how will people be able to watch Forgive, or see and listen to Forgive and Forgotten?
Yeah, so Forgive and Forgotten is going to premiere this Friday at the Ken Sealing Waterloo Region Museum. So if you're in the Kitchener-Waterloo area this weekend, we'll have showings Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the museum, which is an exciting partnership. If you're anywhere else in the world, we've got performances the next weekend, 26, 27, 28, all at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Virtually, it'll be on our YouTube channel. It's free or by donation for those shows. And then we're going back to Kitchener-Waterloo on December 1st and 2nd for Princess Cinemas, which is the small independent theater in Waterloo. And so we'll have 2 showings there as well. At those in-person shows, we actually have some sort of like experts in the field that are going to do like a talk back panel after the show. And so there'll be an opportunity to hear more sort of and get those resources like I was talking about before. And then we'll have a recording of that panel for those virtual showings that we'll have online.
Is it Princess Twin or Princess Original?
Princess Twin.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah,
that's
I have to
theaters or
ask
best
about
theaters?
is there a specific difference between the two?
I mean, Princess Twins were like newer. Princess Original was like the old school one. You had to like go up the stairs, and they had like the curtain, and like I mean, I got love for both.
yeah.
I didn't know that. I'm super hyped about that. I love those theaters. I
Me
have
too.
a T-shirt of the Princess Cinema.
No. That's awesome.
Cool. Well, we have to come back and see it a second time, John. All of those dates and the tickets and everything is available on our website at theaterthebeat.ca, and we use the Canadian spelling of theater with the RE.
All right. Now, as we're just sort of finishing up, one of the things that I have been asking ever since March of 2020, just at the end, is a question about joy, because we've all had our ups and downs in this whole pandemic, moments that are fabulous and wonderful, and we've also had ones that are not so much. So I always think that it's a good idea to spread some of the joy that we do have. So I'd like for each of you, if you could, to tell me about what's been giving you joy recently. Whoever wants to go first, feel free to jump in.
I can start. I've always been a cyclist. I love riding my bike everywhere. I have a bike all around Toronto. And so that's something that gives me joy. And so last year, as part of a fundraiser for Theatre of the Beat, I wanted to push myself and see my sort of personal records of how far I could go in a day. And so last year, I was able to accomplish 180 kilometers on my bike in one day, which was awesome. And so I was really proud of that. But I sometimes I'm unaware of when I'm not feeling my best, and my wife Elise is very good at reminding me. And so last night she's like, Cedric, I'm kicking you out of the house, go for a bike ride, come back afterwards. And so it was nice that I have a partner that's willing to just, kick me out of the house and help me find some joy again.
Nice. Erin, how about you?
Yeah. Well, one exciting thing with things kind of opening up sort of is that swimming lessons are back on, and I have 3 young kids, and so we're taking swimming lessons, which they love. But we have twins who are 5 years old, and so because of the way the swimming lessons work, you have to go in with a caregiver for each kid. So at first I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this. I'm going to spend my entire life at the pool, but it's actually been really wonderful, because it means we kind of have this like hour of like individual time with each kid where we get to just go and like hang out in the pool, and it's been really lovely. Yeah.
Awesome. Johnny? You're muted, Johnny.
Okay, great. Hello.
Yeah,
Audiobooks have been my big joy over the pandemic. Like I really struggle with reading novels. Like I don't know, I can't do it. I can read plays, but novels I really struggle with it. But I knew that I was missing out on all of these classic stories, and I've just been demolishing audiobooks. Like I mean, you said something, Phil, about just like, like it's just right in your ears, and like I probably listen like a couple hours every day to these books, and I've started finding books that I like, and I can read so much now, and it's just really life-giving to me.
Nice. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me this evening. Johnny, Erin, Cedric, thanks for coming on the live stream and talking to me about Forgiven Forgotten. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I hope you guys have a lot of success with it.
Thanks for having us on, Phil.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Phil.
It's good to see you guys too.
You too, Johnny.